Hello and welcome back. We have Wing, our favorite guest in this Decode Your 20 series, coming back to have a fruitful discussion about life and about whether life is an illusion and how this leads towards thinking that humans are designed for survival. These are Wing's ideas. They are very interesting, and I think Wing has a lot more to say, but I'm curious to find out the answer, whether life is simply an illusion. So before we start, Wing, why don't you tell us a bit about you?
Sure. Thanks, Andrei, for having me back on. Excited to talk to you again today. Quick background about me. I'm living in Bangkok right now. Was born and raised here. Spent most of my career in San Francisco, but recently moved back here to start a new venture capital fund. I see it Southeast Asia, so I'm investing out of that fund now. That's my full-time job. Yeah, I'll leave it at that. I think I want to spend the majority of time talking about the idea. So yeah, let me know how you want to start this off. Excited to talk about this topic.
That's great. We were chatting and I've sent you a message about talking this idea that a recent idea to me about like 2 years ago. I read that money is simply an illusion, and money, meaning the piece of paper or the actual digit in a bank account, it's valuable because everybody believes in it. And Harari goes in the book more and talks that money, it's simply an idea which gets actual value because everybody thinks about it. And you said something even more interesting. So I gave you a particular case that money is an illusion and it gets power because we believe in it. And you said something more, that everything is an illusion. So can you detail what you wanted to say about that?
Sure. So this idea, I came across it a few years ago, and I think it's probably been one of the biggest, one of the most powerful driving ideas that I've had. So first came across this reading Jack Kerouac's book, On the Road. I'm not sure if you're familiar with Jack Kerouac or not, but he's one of my favorite writers. And I want to set the tone for this conversation by reading out a small passage from that book that actually I think transmits this idea very well. So I'm just going to start by reading that, and we can dig more into it. Cool. So this is from his book On the Road, and then this is the passage. I have lots of things to teach you now in case we ever meet. Concerning the message that was transmitted to me under a pine tree in North Carolina on a cold winter moonlit night. It said that nothing ever happened, so don't worry. It's all like a dream. Everything is ecstasy inside. We just don't know it because of our thinking minds. But our true blissful essence of mind is known that everything is all right forever and forever and forever. Close your eyes, let your hands and nerve endings drop. Stop breathing for 3 seconds. Listen to the silence inside the illusion of the world, and you will remember the lesson you forgot, which was taught in the immense Milky Way, soft cloud, innumerable worlds long ago, and not even at all. It is one vast awakened thing. I call it the golden eternity. It is perfect. We were never really born, we will never really die. It has nothing to do with the imaginary idea of a personal self, other selves, many selves everywhere. Self is only an idea, a mortal idea. That which passes into everything is one thing. It's a dream already ended. There's nothing to be afraid of and nothing to be glad about. I know this from staring at mountains months on end. They never show any expression. They are like empty space. Do you think the emptiness of space will ever crumble away? Mountains will crumble, but the emptiness of space, which is the one universal essence of mind, the vast awakenhood, empty and awake, will never crumble away because it was never born. So that's a very interesting take on this same idea. And I grew up in a Buddhist family, right? So this idea I've always been partially exposed to this idea. But so there's different perspectives we can take a look at this from. But I think, there's the Buddhist perspective, there's this Jack Kerouac perspective. It's very like hippie thing, like, oh, just relax, it's okay, we're all one thing. But I think the most interesting perspective is the scientific perspective, which is what I want to talk about first, right? So I think one thing you need to recognize is that every molecule in your body, the atoms that construct the molecules, are all traceable to the centers of high mass stars that exploded, right? So to some extent, we are literally all made of the same thing, which is just from the explosion of stars. Like the carbon, nitrogen atoms are the building blocks of what make us here today. So we're all connected to each other biologically, to the earth chemically, and to the rest of the universe, like atomically, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's not that we're better than the universe. We are actually a part of the universe in a very, very core way. We are in the universe, and the universe is in us, literally.
Mm-hmm.
And that's a very powerful idea for me. So this idea that we're literally all the same thing, and anything kind of beyond that is an illusion. And this gets into the second idea, which I wanted to talk about, which we mentioned briefly, is that human beings aren't necessarily designed to perceive the truth. So natural selection means that we're not designed to perceive the world clearly, right? By definition, the traits that make you more likely to survive are passed on to your future generation, right? That
Mm-hmm.
gene, that trait is passed on. So this is an example that I really like. Say you're at the bottom of a hill, there's a boulder rolling down at you. If the boulder is actually 10 meters away, as humans, you would perceive that boulder as closer than 10 meters away. Maybe you perceive it as 5 meters away. What this does, it gives you more time to react. It gets you time to get out of the way. Similar situation, if you hear like rustling behind you in the woods, you might immediately perceive that as a tiger or some predatory threat rather than just the wind, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because these traits exist and they get passed on because they help with selection. So they're passed on. So what the implications is that we're not designed for truth. We're not truth seeking by nature. By nature, we are designed for survival. So we don't perceive things as they truly are.
Mm-hmm.
And then onto the idea of Buddhism, and related to the star Adam's point I was talking about, is that there's this idea that feelings shape essence. So things are only things because we feel that way, right? And it can be positive or negative, but the reality is, we're all the same stuff at some point. Like this is only a mouse because we call it a mouse, like it's labeled a mouse. That's what's conventionally accepted.
Sure.
What it actually is, it's part of us. It's from, atoms, the same atoms as us. So it's all actually the same thing. So reality is like a social construct, and feelings shape essence. And then Buddhism teaches that if you look at the world from nowhere with no feelings, no perception, like we don't even know that's possible, but that's how you find like the metaphysical truth. And feelings are a departure from that truth. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that? I know it was a lot, but would like to get your high level thinking about that as well.
It's interesting what you say, that is your last point, that if you look from the outside with no feelings and nothing, there is one truth. But with this idea of truth, like the more I see, the more I believe that there are multiple truths. Like as there is one reality, there are multiple realities, in the sense that, yes, I agree that there is one general reality, meaning the world just is. But on top of that, each of us have a different reality, meaning we see the actual reality from different angles, typically in our advantage. But each of us, into our head, there is a different reality. And I want to talk with you about this. Do you think that there is actual order in the actual truth, meaning the actual reality? Is there order in that? In our mental reality, we simplify things to find an order, find an explanation of how things goes. So there are a million things that we have to take into consideration in the actual reality, but we simplify all of this. So it's a mess if you consider every single point. You can't. So it's like in a debate, you focus on two things, not on 500 different things. So each of us, call it, give an order and take away the noise from the actual truth to give it a sense, an order. What do you think about this idea of multiple realities? And first, is there order in the actual truth?
If you ask me that, I would probably go back and ask, why is order important? Like what is actually order, and why is that something we should perceive or something that we should strive for? I think that you probably will go crazy over time if you just start dwelling on this idea all the time of, nothing really matters. And in the end, it's just everything's going to die. Time will fade, we'll all fade. All of our existence are basically just a blip in time, right? Like in the great expanse of time, we're already dead.
Sure.
And then adding on to that, there's also this idea of the indifference of nature, which I wanted to talk about. So it's kind of similar to the point of order here, right? So I guess no, there's probably no order. If you really do like first principles, atom level, like we're all the same, nothing actually matters. Shakespeare has a quote I really like. He writes that nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so. So it's the same as Buddhism. It's the same as what science teaches. It's the same as what Jack Kerouac is trying to say. It's this idea that things are good or bad because we think they're good or bad, right? We give an example. If Andrei goes to a restaurant and he stabs the waiter, that's not objectively bad. It's bad because we're conditioned society to think that's bad, but it's the same as a lion eating a deer, hunting a deer and killing a deer, right? You might feel bad for the deer, but that's because it's part of your feeling. Objectively, what's happening is just all atoms rearranging. At any given point in time, it's just atoms rearranging. So nothing is actually bad or good. And that's a very like first principles way to look at it.
Sure.
And if you reason from first principles, I think that's how you have to perceive the world, and you go from there. But what you're saying is you want to care about the outcome of it, right? You think that if everyone thinks this way, yeah, we're all gonna probably go crazy. We're all just maybe gonna live very hedonistic lifestyles, just party a lot, just kill everyone, complete anarchy and chaos and whatever. Yeah, that might be the case, but I don't like to reason from consequence or outcome. My personal preference is to look at it from first principles and what that means and go from there. So that's how I think of it. So I want to ask you, do you agree with Shakespeare when he says nothing is either good or bad, but thinking makes it so? Like, you killing someone is not objectively bad, right? Do you agree with that?
Partially, meaning almost yes. I think that this idea of good and bad, this idea of better or not, it's a function of the perspective from which you look. So when we typically say it's good and bad, we look from a perspective of, let's say, human society, like, is it good for us humans, call it? But I think it's wrong to not mention that. Like, by definition, I believe that good and bad are a function of the perspective. Like, you are saying that stabbing someone is not bad. From a human perspective, it's bad, but from a, let's say, general world infinity of planets perspective, the universe doesn't care about us. I think when we talk about good and bad, the implicit assumption is that we look from the perspective of humans, which makes it bad.
So do you think we should spend more time looking at things from, let's say, a universe or infinite time expanse perspective, rather than being so worked up and focus on the human perspective?
I think it's good to be aware that the global universe perspective exists, but I don't think it's that good to think about it, because it's one of these things that we will probably never find the answer, and there is probably no answer then we can even find. It's like,
what answer? I thought we just gave the answer. What question are you trying to answer?
Yes, like, is it good to think about from the world view perspective or not? I think at the current level of understanding of society, no, because we are too small for the universe, and we live between humans. Put it this way, I think we need to, let's say, aspire that the whole society moves towards a general world universe, good or bad, but I don't think humanity is at that point. So we should probably assess things as good and bad for humanity. It's good to be aware that the others exist, but I don't think it makes it practical to always think about it.
I mean, I think the argument is that there is no good or bad, right? At the end of the day, it's when you feel sad, when you feel happy, it at some very, very basic level, that doesn't exist. It simply is, which is what I think Jack Kerouac is trying to carry over with that quote. It's what Buddhism tries to teach you at some point. But I think there's some interesting takeaways that you actually get from that, and things that are actually actionable as well. So I don't know if you listened to Steve Jobs' Stanford commencement speech. He touches on this idea briefly. He talks about how remembering he'll be dead soon is the most important thing to help you encounter like the big choices in life.
Yes.
Because when you realize you're going to be dead soon, almost everything, right? All like external expectations, fear of like embarrassment, failure, they all kind of fade away. Because you understand that this is not forever. So for me, this has helped me a lot in my thinking. There's like a whole philosophy school of this. It's called like optimistic nihilism. So nihilism is this idea like nothing actually matters. Eventually we will be in thermodynamic equilibrium. Like, so everything tends toward entropy, which is like the heat death of the universe. So no matter who you are, no matter if you're Steve Jobs, the most important person on the planet who built society for the next 200 years, your work isn't going to matter at some point, right? At some point, your stuff won't matter at all. And on a, like in the great expanse of time, we already are dead, right? So knowing that, Andrei, why do you work so hard doing the things that you do? When you know that on a long enough time span, your work doesn't matter. I want to understand if how those two ideas kind of coexist in your head.
It's a very good question. I've been thinking about this, and there is no analytical way of putting these things. Like, I understand that on a long scale, universal point of view, it doesn't matter, but for me it matters. So I probably do that because of my view. I'm not as big as the universe. So from my, let's say, feelings and internal thoughts, and each of us individually is one, it matters for us, and this is why we do it. Like, yes, on the grand universe scale doesn't, but it does for us. So I think this is why, because it matters for me, and I mean on an individual level. Welcome back, and you can see that our screen is changed. The Wing now moved to the north, and this is because our Zoom conversation suddenly closed, and now we are back to continue the conversation on the same topic, but also with interesting questions. So Wing, let's think about this idea of death. And there are many people who say that realizing and keeping in mind that death is important, it's coming. Just thinking that death is coming makes people get perspective over life. Like, imagining that death is imminent makes you put things into perspective. But my question to you is, assuming that remembering that death and feeling that death is coming is good, but the problem is that on a daily basis, we just our mind just flows to the constant work, the constant things that we have to do, and we just do not want to think of death on a daily basis. So how do we instill this constant sentiment of remembering and feeling that death is coming to get perspective? Can you instill that into you? And if so, tell us how.
Yeah, that's a good question, right? I think, so this is kind of going off Steve Jobs' Stanford commencement address, where he has this one line where he says that remembering that I'll be dead soon is the most important tool I've ever encountered to help me make big choices in life. So we're kind of going off the premise you mentioned, that having that sensation at the back of your mind is good for you. I think that's true. I think there's several implications of that. One is that things are just in more perspective. You value your time more. You think more closely about what you spend your time doing and what matters and what actually doesn't matter at the end of the day. For me personally, I don't think it's been very hard to have that thought front of mind. I mean, whether you like it or not, death is something that everyone has to deal with at some point in their lives, right? People, pets, even, like, these are all lessons that you learn, and they're all part of being human. So I think maybe some people who have not, maybe who have had very nice lives, haven't had to experience that yet, that could make it more difficult for them to remember. But one thing that I think would help in terms of, if you want to have this idea of constant mind, because first thing, like, a lot of people push back of this, right? A lot of people don't want this top of mind. They don't want to think about this. It's something that they don't want to think about, but it's very much part of the human experience, and a big part of what it means to be human. So I think one is just not taking everything for granted, being grateful for things that we have every day and things that we're able to do every day. So what I mean by, I mean, I think it can be something as simple as, when you wake up in the morning, write down 5 things you're grateful for that you might typically take for granted. Like the fact that you're living in a developed country with internet access, right? You get food, you don't have to worry about starving. You have 2 arms and 2 legs, where a lot of people don't. And so it's keeping context that it's always a scale. There's a lot of people who are better off, but there's also a lot more people who are worse off than you.
I agree with this, and analytically, let's say I remember this, but it's hard to feel this. Like, typically to me, it happens that if you think about these things today, tomorrow, and another 15 days, then you become essentially immune at them. Like you stop feeling anything, because like you heard this thing so much that it just doesn't penetrate your mind anymore. Or does it?
I mean, I think there's a difference. Like, there's a difference between hearing something and truly knowing it, right? Like a lot of lessons you're taught growing up as a kid, you know it, right? Like be kind to other people, treat other people how you want to be treated. But then there's a moment where some of these lessons click and then you truly know it. I think it's different for everyone, but there's a big distinction between remembering something and understanding something versus truly knowing it and feeling it inside your body. Like it just this deep level of understanding that's different. And maybe it's just crossing that line somehow.
Mm-hmm.
That might be it. I don't have a great answer for that for you there, but
I think sorry for interrupting. I think this is a good time to plug your blog, because so Wing has a great blog, and one of his latest articles, and this stuck with me. I remember this. I was reading one of your articles, and you were saying a quote that your uncle is saying, and that is take pauses, and when something good happens to you, you should ask yourself, is like, hey, if this isn't beautiful, then what it is? Like to appreciate the moment. Check Wing's
exactly. So
blog.
That was a quote from, who was it a quote from? It was an author I read. I'll link it. I'll ask Andrei to link it in the notes here. It wasn't my uncle, but it was from Kurt Vonnegut. That's who it was. It was a book Kurt Vonnegut wrote. It basically goes, anytime you're enjoying yourself or having a good time, don't forget to just say out loud, if this isn't nice, what is? Because a lot of times, like, again, we take things for granted, right? We're not very much in the moment, very much kind of in this momentum flow. And I think part of that is just society pushing things on us, this constant need for progress, like you're running on a hamster wheel. So being able to kind of take a break from that and see like the bigger picture, and knowing that your time here is limited and you should spend it how you want to is a big part of it as well, I think.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Are you grateful in the mornings, Wing? Like, do you actually practice this?
I don't do this every day, but I think as a whole, I am just like throughout the day. I think about stuff like this a lot. Just like trying not to take things for granted and appreciating like every moment. Like you're spending time with family or friends or whatever. I think that's something I'm pretty good at overall. I don't have a practice of it in the morning, but it is something that I think I've internalized, and it's helped me a lot. But I think what's interesting is, okay, so that's the first idea, right? If you're able to instill that sense somehow, that remember that you're going to die. But what are some takeaways from that? I think one big takeaway is this idea of meaning. Like once you realize that your time here is very limited, a lot of the things that you thought mattered don't actually matter, then what actually does matter? And we talked about this earlier, is maybe nothing actually matters, but that's a very shitty way to live. And you mentioned this idea of meaning, and I know you have some interesting thoughts around this too. So we'd love to hear you share that.
So this idea with meaning, I heard from Jordan Peterson, and he studied this a lot. And the main point is as follows: society tells us that we should seek happiness. And this happiness is, call it the goal of everyone, which is fine, like feel happy. But I feel that this word happiness got a wrong connotation. Like happiness, to me, it seems like a short-term thing. Like you feel happy now, but seeking happiness, it's wrong, because it's inevitable that there are come moments in which you are not happy. Like it's just a fact that there is going to be shitty moments. For example, even in your career, like on a general, you are going to like it, but there are going to be moments which you don't. Like you have to reply to 500 emails. Somebody is going to make you sad. Some people are going to, betray you, or there are moments which sadness is for sure. So if we seek happiness, it's flawed, because you are guaranteed to have many moments in which you won't have it. You would rather have a walk, but you have to clean the house. So he proposes this idea, hey, instead of seeking happiness, which you are guaranteed of not having it all the time, you should seek meaning. Mm-hmm. And meaning, as I see it, is, let's say, global happiness. On a macro scale, you are happy in general. You don't look at every individual moment of happiness. You look if you have the meaning. And meaning is like an umbrella to, let's say, feel that you have a purpose in this life. And meaning is something bigger. The question is, how do you get meaning? You get meaning by taking responsibility for something, like feeling that there is something which matters to you, and you are an essential part of making that thing happen. Like without you, that thing wouldn't happen. Like you feel that you are responsible for making something happen, let's say raising a family or planting a forest in your city, or things where you take responsibility. The magic is in this idea of responsibility now. So if you take responsibility, that is going to give you meaning, and it means global happiness. And the last thing which is important is, why doesn't society tell you about meaning? Because until 1 year ago, when this guy Jordan Peterson I heard him talking about meaning and responsibility. I have never ever heard this idea of meaning, and that is essentially responsibility which makes you happy. So the problem is that society doesn't tell you that, and the answer is very basic. It's actually straightforward, because meaning can't be sold, but happiness can. Happiness, almost everything that we buy is sold as making you happy. Even if you look at the slogans, if you look at Coke, the slogan is that you open happiness. If you look at Sephora, is that you wear happiness, like you put makeup, and their slogan is you literally wear happiness. It's like, mate, you don't wear anyway. But this idea of happiness, it's sellable. You eat happiness, you buy chocolate. So this is why society doesn't want to tell us that. But when you see it, it's interesting. Now, what do you think about this, Wing?
Yeah, no, I completely agree with you there. I think we can do an entire 30-minute conversation just on this idea of meaning alone. But you raised a few interesting points there. So I'm actually reading a book right now called Man's Search for Meaning. So it's very timely as well. It's by this author. His name is Viktor E. Frankl. So he actually was a prisoner in a concentration camp during the Holocaust. And this is kind of his autobiography, writing about his experiences there. There's a few quotes in there that stand out. One that I particularly like is, those who have a why to live can bear with almost any how. So, your idea of those who have a meaning can bear through almost every single condition. And like you said, right, happiness, there are up and downs. But if you have that umbrella, that guiding function and guiding principle, you're able to actually bear anything. And he was able to bear being in the concentration camp and all the experiences there. And another quote I really liked was that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of the human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given set of circumstances, to choose one's way. So it's this idea that you can't control the external world, right? Everything externally is almost outside of your control. The only thing you can control is how you react to things that happen to you. So it's like your own reaction to certain things. I thought it was very, very profound as well. But, I think the more important takeaway, or one thing I want to talk about here more, is this idea of how do you find meaning? And you said that you do that by taking responsibility for something. And you also mentioned that you have to have this idea that you're the only person in the world who can do this, or without you, it wouldn't happen. That's very difficult to do, right? Because that kind of implies that you need to have a very specialized niche skill set, that you're the one to do it. You have an important role to play. And that's not true for, most people, or if not everyone, right? Even though we're all unique, they tell you that, but not all of us have a unique skill set that makes the statement that if you weren't around, this wouldn't happen true, right? So how do you think about that? Because like, if I say my meaning is to plant a tree, 1,000 other people can plant a tree. It doesn't necessarily have to be me. If mine is to raise kids, or my kids, maybe there's like, I don't know, someone else who can raise his family too. It doesn't necessarily have to be me. So how do you kind of combat those two things, or how do you think about that?
Have to be you, because like if it's your family, then you are responsible to earn for them.
Well, what if there's like a stepfather or something? I don't know, like you get a divorce of your wife, and then someone else comes in the picture, right? Like it doesn't necessarily. There's no like, yeah, I'm saying it doesn't necessarily have to be. Maybe go with the tree example where that's more clear,
Mhm.
But would love to see how you think about that as well.
Yes. So I don't think searching for like a general answer which works in 100% of the cases is necessarily good, but I think everybody can find meaning into something by taking responsibility for something. This idea of like, if you just take responsibility for raising a family, you already can give the feeling of responsibility to, I know, like 80% of the population already. And for the other 20, everybody has different experiences to what's meaningful for them. And for example, think about being born in a random city, and maybe you had a mentor who helped you and told you to go to university. Like this idea of being born from nowhere and being a person at some time who gave you a chance. You have good examples with this idea, like people giving you chances. I think this can make you think that, hey, I should take responsibility for giving chances to other people. It's like, sure, there might be other people who might give them the chances, but it's your responsibility, or you feel the call to give the chances to people. This is one other example. I think everybody has something which left a mark on them and they want to do the same for the world. What do you think?
Yeah. I agree with that. I think it's harder to figure out what that is, or it's hard to figure out what that is, right? Because there's no clear path, and because there's no single meaning, right? There's no kind of objective meaning for everyone.
Sure.
If there was an objective single meaning, then we'd all be slaves to that meaning, which would suck, right? So there's no objective meaning, which means you have to go through and find that yourself. And maybe there are different ways to get there. I think you learn a lot through struggle, just doing things that are hard. And this doesn't necessarily have to be kind of, Viktor Frankl being concentration camp, even like a really difficult workout or solving hard problems, right? I think there's a lot that you get when you go through struggle where you learn about yourself and who you actually are. So I think that's part of it. But yeah, I love this idea in general of taking responsibility. There was an interview I read the other day. His name was Bruno something. I believe he was a cashmere salesman. Here's a quote that I got from there. I kind of pasted up, but I'm just gonna read it out for you. Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr., Kafka, Kennedy, and the Pope. At the end of the day, all these great people, what do they focus on? Human dignity. And this is the important part. They all talk about being custodians in the world. Hadrian, the emperor, said, I feel responsibility for the beauty in the world. So it's exactly what you're saying. This idea of accountability, responsibility, feeling like you're the steward for something, right? Something has to get done that you have to, like something you have to do has to get done. So I think it's yeah, you're right on the spot there. It's just a matter of how we figure that out. And part of that is also kind of what you learn throughout your lifetime, right? Different experiences that you have, which leads me to another question I've been wanting to ask you as well. Kind of zooming out a bit of a high level question, but what would you say is the single biggest life lesson or biggest takeaway that you have and would love to share? Yeah, because you can only pick one.
I think my biggest lesson that I learned is try to see the world as it actually is rather than as you want it to be. So try to leave your ideology out and actually look at things the way they are. And I'm going to give you a basic example. Before my first internship, I thought that employees, you just give them the task to do, and they, for whatever, they just get responsibility and they do those tasks without you even needing to check them. Like, I never worked before, so in my ideology, people are responsible and they are proactive and they work. And if you look at the world, it's not like that. Like, there are a few, but it's not how the world actually is. And you need, a manager who needs to check that, and he needs to make sure. And there are many such examples of very big difference between how you think the world actually is rather than the way you imagine it. because our imagination is just wrong, and the way that we think things are, it's mostly shaped by what we see in our immediate circle and what we see in the media, like what is just pumped into our heads, and just has nothing to do with reality. Like movies have nothing to do with reality mostly, and what's happening in your small circle basically has almost nothing to do with reality as well. It's like a bubble, and it's very complicated, but I think we should seek to find out, how the world actually is, rather than we actually want it to be, because there is plenty of frustration which comes by like you seeking an ideal, and then the world, it's not like that, and you just don't want to be frustrated. You want to understand how the world actually is, rather than, I mean, aspire to a better world, but look at the world, leave ideology outside, like just take things as they are, not as you want them to be.
Yeah, I think that's great. And it's a big issue now. You can see, especially in America, with this idea of everyone has their own ideologies around their little social circles, and this idea that a Trump supporter and a Biden supporter, they just can't get along for whatever reason.
Yeah.
Right? People right now are being discounted. Like there's this idea that you're morally compromised or you're a bad human being if you support Trump. And that's just not true, right? Like that's just like factually not true. So it's very important for people with different ideologies, different ideas, to still be able to talk, have a conversation, and try to, like you say, understand the world as it really is, not through the lenses of what they understand or believe.
What about you, Wing? What's your one big lesson that you've got so far?
Yeah. There's definitely a bunch, but I think the biggest one I have, and it's actually very related to the topic that we're talking about, I guess in one sentence, is don't take yourself too seriously. And let me kind of explain that a bit more.
Yeah.
I think people go around in their daily lives, they're very kind of like locked in, right? They're like, okay, I wake up, I go to work, I do this, repeat. I wake up, I get this promotion, I get this job. I work hard, SAT, get into school, then get a job, then have family, have kids. They're very locked into themselves. They are. And this idea of not taking yourself too seriously is really the same idea we've been talking about, which is to have context, right? Like you have to realize that all of us are sitting on a spaceship that's flying through space at 30 kilometers per second. Like we're literally on spaceships floating around. Like the shit you do on your daily life doesn't actually matter that much, right? In the long time horizon, like we're all dead, right? In the great expanse of time, we're dead. Universe doesn't care what we do. And everyone gets so caught up in their little problems and in their daily lives that if you have a positive, good attitude and you're able to look at things and not take yourself too seriously, that's an important part, right? I think you can take your craft seriously, whatever you're practicing, without taking yourself seriously. Be able to make fun of yourself and just contextualize that, yeah, sure, shit happens to you, shit happens to everyone. But if you're able to put that in context and not take it too seriously, I think that's a much better approach to living life, and people will benefit more. Everyone will be a lot more relaxed, a lot more understanding, and kinder to each other in general if they have that philosophy. So I think that's the biggest lesson I've learned.
I see. So are you pointing that if you make a mistake, essentially nobody cares about it? Or like you should?
It doesn't care nearly as much. It doesn't matter nearly as much as you think it does. Like it really doesn't. Like everyone's just in their heads all the time. I just like step back a bit, like see the bigger picture. Like it's a mistake. Like the world's gonna keep spinning. We're gonna keep moving. Nothing's gonna break gigantically. Like yeah.
I think it's a great lesson, and it's harder to put it in practice.
Yes. You should ask everyone you meet that question. What's the biggest life lesson you've learned?
Well, and this ends our episode, but I'm curious to see what you have liked from this episode. Just leave a comment down below and share this. Thank you for watching. Thank you so much, Wing, for being part of this. And yeah, looking forward to more episodes, and keep watching Decode Your 20s. See you in the next one.
Thanks, Andrei. It's great chatting. We'll talk soon.
Bye.